As the oldest continuous parliament in the world, Tynwald on the Isle of Man carries a rich history, but within its majestic halls also lies an artefact that captures the imagination of all who behold it. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be talking about the Parliament of Tynwald, but also their ceremonial sword of state, the Sword of Man. If you liked the video, then hit that like button. If you dislike it, then dislike it. But let's get this video underway. Tynwald claims to be over 1,000 years old and thus the oldest continuous parliament in the world. Iceland's Althing claims world's oldest parliament, though through non-continuous operation. In 1979, the Manx people celebrated the millennium of their parliament. The year was picked arbitrarily by officials, as there's no evidence indicating that such an assembly was held in 979, or that any such event resembled the modern-day court. Tynwald originally comprised of only 24 members of the House of Keys, commonly referred to as the Keys. There were 4 members for each of the 6 sheddings on the island. The earliest surviving record of the Keys dates from 1417. The Keys were also not originally an elected body, and membership was for life. When a vacancy arose, the remaining members selected the replacement member. In general, membership of the Keys passed down through the leading families on the island. In the 16th century, the Keys met irregularly. They were akin more to a jury which was summoned from time to time by the Lord of Man or by the Deemsters when they required advice as to the law. But by the 1600s, the Keys had finally become a permanent body. Until 1577, the Keys merely declared and interpreted the ancient common law when queries arose. This developed into the power to create new laws, a function that Tynwald adopted around 1610. In October 1651, during the English Civil War, the island fell to the parliamentary forces, who took over the administration of the government. During this period, Tynwald met only sporadically. Following the restoration of the monarchy, though, control of the island was returned to the Lords of Man. The Keys saw a reduction in their power at this point, as Tynwald was reconstituted as the Lord of Man, the Governor, the principal officers, and the Deemsters, who constitute the Lords' Council, and the Commons represented by their Keys. Administration of the government was vested in the Governor, and the Lords of Man became absentee landlords. The Keys were unhappy with the changes and agreed to very few new laws after this. In 1737, Tynwald obtained further powers in addition to its monopoly on lawmaking. The Agreement of Tynwald would be required for all taxation in imitation of the constitutional practice of Great Britain. This was a short-lived arrangement, as in 1765 the Lord of Man sold his rights over the island back to the British Crown. Following the revestment of the Lordship of Man into the British Crown in 1765, the British government assumed all powers to impose and collect taxes. Tynwald was left with no money to spend and little power, although it was still able to bring about social change by the repeal in 1771 of restrictive labour legislation. In 1791, the Royal Commission on the Isle of Man was formed to examine the governance and finances of the island, and the Commissioner's report noted that prior to the revestment, no minutes or journals of the proceedings of the Council or the House of Keys had ever been kept. In respect to government and laws, the Manx appear in all ages to have been a distinct people, and in some degree an independent or not annexed to any other kingdom. The people, however, beyond all written record, have clearly within claimed and enjoyed the right and privilege of being governed and regulated by laws of their own making, or consented to by themselves, or by their constitutional representative. To maintain this independence of the legislature is held to be the first duty of every Manx man. They dread, therefore, and must ever dread, the interference in their internal concerns, or even a precedent being made for such an interference from any other legislature on earth, even the British. This was from the report of the Commissioners of Inquiry from the Isle of Man in 1792. As a result, The Keys asked the British government to dissolve Tynwald and to assent to legislation for a new elected parliament, which they hoped would have a stronger voice to challenge the new government of the island, based in distant Whitehall. To this end, the Keys organised a petition of 800 signatures, which was presented to the British government. It was not until 1866 that Tynwald finally passed legislation that would see some of its members elected for the first time. However, before 1866, Tynwald's primary function had been that of the island's Court of Appeal. The House of Keys Election Act 1866 transferred this judicial power to a separate court. Following on from this though, the Manx sword estate, which was also going to be discussed in this video, is a ceremonial sword that represents the Tynwald on the Isle of Man. It represents the duties of the sovereign of the Isle of Man and is used every month in Tynwald and annually during the Tynwald Day ceremony. There have been 3 swords used for such functions over the years. One is used for the ceremony, one is housed in a museum, and the other one was lost in the 18th century. The sword of state is popularly said to date to the mid-13th century. However, it is not unlike 15th century ceremonial swords used in England, and recent analysis dates it to the 15th century as well. The power of this sword lies not only in its physical form, but also in the symbolism it carries. The sword signifies the duty of the sovereign, who through the Tynwald is bound to protect and defend the Manx people from their foes. Without the sword, the Tynwald cannot be deemed to be properly constituted. The sword is used at the Tynwald Day sitting at St. John's and is carried in front of the Lieutenant Governor in a procession. It is also used whenever the Tynwald sits in the legislative chambers in Douglas. When the Tynwald is not sitting, a replica sword is on display, and when the Parliament is in session, members of the House of Keys and Legislative Council gather to pass it ceremoniously. The sword itself has a 2-edged blade of steel 29 inches long, slightly more than 1.5 inches wide where it intersects the guard. The guard is a thin steel band 11 inches long, and the sword's hilt is made of hardwood and measures 9 inches to the pommel. The pommel is made of steel, flattened on both sides, and measures about 2 inches in diameter. Both sides of the pommel are surmounted with shields bearing the spurred 3 legs of man. The sword of fate, the sword of state is popularly attributed to Olaf the Black, King of Man and the Isles, who reigned from 1229 to 1237. Similar examples of ceremonial swords are those used in the English cities of Chester and Newcastle upon Tyne, both of which date to the mid-15th century. As stated before, recent analysis of the Manx sword has determined it's also a 15th century design and probably made in London, though the blade itself is thought to have been fitted in the late 16th century or 17th. It's possible that the sword was made for the 1422 Tynwald meeting that was attended to by Sir John Stanley. And that brings us to the end of another video. Thank you very much for making it to the end. Please don't forget to share, like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see everyone next time. Bye bye.